What's up, guys? Welcome to Gwhisky. My name's Jeff. This is a channel where I offer my thoughts and opinions on a specific whiskey, and if you stick around to the end, I'll be giving it a score as well. If that sounds interesting, hit subscribe down below. With that out of the way, let's jump into our review. Today we're looking at the Arran Port Cask Finish. Stick around. Alright, so we're keeping the re-review thing going on the channel. Last week I looked at the Arran Sherry Cask. I looked at a Ben Riach for the second time recently as well. And it's interesting. Pretty much every time that I do a re-review on this channel, the score is almost never the same. Of course, whiskey is a batch product and the quality and the flavors can change. Of course, people do change as well. So it's always interesting to come back to a bottle that you've already looked at and just see where you land on it the second time around. And I'm hoping that I'm going to like this more than I did last time. Last time I reviewed it, I thought it was fine. The first time I looked at it, I scored it 83, which is not terrible, of course, but it's good, it's average, it's okay. And I always carry on about how I don't really like a strong port or wine influence in my whiskey, although I do feel like I should start calming down with that. Because really, there's quite a few port whiskeys that I do enjoy. My favorite affordable Glenmorangie is the 14-year-old Kinta Reuben. That one is a port finish. I've got the Dalmore port on the go right now. That one's pretty good. Cavalan makes great port matured stuff, so port can be good. Now, it's still not my favorite, and port has been an accomplice in quite a few crimes against whiskey, and I do like sherry more. But whether it's like sherry or port or wine, anytime you have like a very fruity, sweet cask influence, you do run the risk of overwhelming your base spirit. However, if you watched last week's review of the Arran Sherry Cask, you'll know that I said that it did a great job of balancing the cask influence and the distillate, where it wasn't completely overwhelmed and the two sort of like work together. So hopefully we're going to see that happen again here. And of course, I am going to keep an open mind here. I'm not going to let my prejudice against port affect my judgment here. I will be looking at this whiskey based on the content of its character. I think I just quoted Martin Luther King in a whiskey review. Anyway, this one is officially no age stated, but it is roughly 8 years old. It's bourbon matured and port cask finished. Like I said, I gave it an 83 last time, so hopes are high that we're going to do better this time around. Let's find out. Let's jump into our review. In the meantime, if you'll kindly leave a like down below, that'd be greatly appreciated. Well, it is an Arran, so we can expect very good specs. This one delivers. We get 50% ABV here. It is non-chill filtered and the color is natural. Cool beans. As many of you guys know, I absolutely love the Arran look. I love the bottle shape. I love the label design. It all works for me. This one is a little bit different in the sense that it's black, but I feel like the darker color scheme matches the color of the whiskey inside. As usual, we've got great presentation. We'll give it 5 out of 5. We do have non-chill filtered natural color on the label, which is always great to see. Now, there is something I touched on last week with the sherry review, and I kind of want to bring it up again because Arran is known for their transparency, and that's reflecting the fact that they're willing to share what the rough age of these whiskeys are. So the sherried one, roughly 7, this one, roughly 8. You're telling people that, so why not take it one step further and just put it on the label for us? I know that's asking a lot, and I'm nitpicking here. This is a great label, it's a great look with great info, but I'm greedy. On the nose, we get sweet port notes. We get stuff like berries, strawberries, candied apples, brown sugar. We've got citrus in here, so like oranges and limes. There's Concord grapes, wine tannins, rum-soaked raisins, sticky toffee pudding. Overall, it's a sweet fruity nose with a kind of zesty, citrusy counterbalance. Quite nice. The palate and finish come on with some really forward fruitiness. It gets darker than the nose. We get stuff like dark plums, apple skin, blood oranges, gingerbread, dark chocolate, roasted chestnuts, cinnamon, anise, and once again, those rum-soaked raisins. Like, this is definitely a dram I feel like I should have been drinking at Christmas. It's a medium finish. Okay, so I feel like in this review, I'm touching on a lot of the same points that I was making last week in my sherry cask review. Much like the sherry cask, I prefer my more recent bottling. I prefer this bottle to the last one I had. I think it's a more interesting, more engaging whiskey. Now, is it the whiskey that's changed? Is it me? We don't know. Very mysterious. It's the whiskey though. Now, the port influence is quite strong here, but I just feel like it's much less flat. It's more dynamic. It's more interesting than it used to be. And obviously that's a good thing. It's nice to see that improvement because I'll be honest, the wine cask influences that we used to get in Arran's were never my favorite line of whiskeys. Like back when they looked like this, I didn't much care for them. When they switched over to the new bottles, they were still not my favorite Arran's. I thought they were some of the weaker Arran's out there, in fact. So it is nice to see a change for the better. We saw it last week with the sherry cask. I'm seeing it again this week with the port cask. That's kind of encouraging. You know, it's not every day that things get better in whiskey. It's usually the other way around. So there's hope. There's hope for the children. That being said, this is not a mind-blowing whiskey. It is really good. I definitely do like it more than stuff like the Amontillado. The Sauternes is one I have not had in a really long time. Should probably come back to it, but if memory serves, it was just okay. I think I do prefer this one as well. The sherry I like marginally more than this, but it's close. To be fair though, that might have something to do with the fact that the sherry cask has a higher ABV, which is always a good way to get in my good graces. But this one, still fantastic. I think the nose is probably the weakest part of the experience. It's not a bad nose, it's a good nose, but things get much more interesting on the palate and through to the finish. That's when we get those dark plummy notes and things get really jammy and juicy. Which is ironic because, little known fact about me here guys, Jammy and Juicy is actually the name of a rap duo that I was a part of back in 1992. So yeah, I think this is one of the better port matured whiskeys to be had out there. It's not the best one, but it is one of the better ones. And I'm actually considering doing a full video about port where I do comparison. So it'll be like a side-by-side, might even be a blind side-by-side. And I'm thinking I might do it with something like this one, the Quinta Reuben from Glenmorangie, the Dalmore Port, and the Tibetan 14-year-old port cask matured. I don't know if that's something that would be interesting to you guys. You can let me know down below in the comments if that's something you want to see. Anyway, overall, I feel much better about this bottle than I did my last one. It's still a very cask-forward whiskey. It's very cask-driven, which always makes me a bit weary, but it doesn't completely overwhelm the Arran-based spirits, so cask-forward, yes, but the Arran is still in there. And like the sherry, I like that our cask influence here isn't too dark or too heavy or too brooding. And fair enough, dark brooding port doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Sometimes it's nice to have less sweetness and sometimes there's more complexity. But in this case, it's not something I want because Arran itself as a distillate is more bright, it's more fresh, it's more clean. So I think the cask influence kind of complements that. By the way, this is literally the same thing I said last week about the sherry cask. And I wasn't sure I was making sense back then. Still not sure. Anyway, good whiskey, better than last time. And the comparison to my last bottle aside, I just enjoy drinking this whiskey. I think it's good stuff. And of course, you know, reviewers, vloggers, bloggers, we're not supposed to love stuff that's too cask forward. And that's true for me most of the time, but I do make exceptions, and I think this is one of them. This is good stuff. I'm going to give it 86. I'm sure there's plenty of you out there that want to go a little bit higher with this score, and I get it, but ultimately, port is just not my favorite style of whiskey. I like it, we're cool, we shook hands, but it's just never going to be a favorite, so I'm sticking with 86. For me, port is like your friend's friend who you're cool with. Like, sherry's my friend, I love sherry, and then port is sherry's friend. And when I see port, I'm usually cool with him, but he's sherry's friend first, so we're not tight. And that little tidbit concludes my smart, informed, and well-considered whiskey review. Here's value. So this one is cheaper than the sherry in my market, and I hear that's the case in most markets. I've even heard that in some markets, the port and the 10 are roughly the same price. Now, I didn't touch on the 10 in my review, but I'll say this up front. I think the 10 is the best whiskey of the three. It's the best value and overall just the best quality. But we're not always going to stick to one type of Arran. If you want to branch out a little bit, this one is a great bang for buck option, especially if you're a port fan, so highly recommend it. Okay, that's it for me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to help support the channel, I do have the Patreon. Otherwise, you can like, comment, and subscribe. Always appreciated. Of course, I do want to hear from you. Have you tried the Arran port? How would you compare it to the 10? How would you compare it to the sherry? What were your thoughts on it? Let me know down below. And finally, down below in the comments, you can let me know what you want to see me review next, and I'll keep it in mind for my upcoming videos. Bye, guys.